I'm an alcoholic. My name's Susan. And I don't even text and all this electronic stuff with this microphone. I'm just old-fashioned kind of gal. What I want to be. I am an alcoholic. I had an alcoholic trip on the way over here tonight, and I just thought, it's no big deal. There are no big deals. The young, handsome young man who met me at the door said I can tell about why I was almost late when I get to talking, so I'm going to tell you why I was almost late. I have a problem somehow or another ever knowing where I am and where I'm going. I know where I want to be, but that's about it. And just so grateful for the steps. That's one of the reasons. But I'm real bright when it comes to reading floor plans and maps and following 1, 2, 3s when I want to be. But you don't tell me to go down a block, take a left and a right, because I will get lost. I go into McDonald's and I go out the wrong door. It's just how I do. And my husband knows that, and he, several years ago, bought me this really cool little TomTom GPS thing. The only problem with it is it has a touch screen. And if I touch it wrong, it'll take me to a recent destination. So the last time it did that, and I kept going without realizing it, I went all the way to Clayton and back home again. I looked around and thought, this looks like my road, and it was like my road. So I don't know if you're lucky I'm here tonight or not, but I'm here, and I got here because I had that, but I almost didn't get here because I had that. So. And then I got here and I could not remember where the door was. So I called everybody, and so I'm going to take a moment. I'm not nervous about speaking yet. I will be when I kind of get over this anxiety about being here. But I am here, and I want to thank you for asking me, Tom. I had not made a note of the fact that I was speaking here. And when he called me yesterday, Tom called me to confirm I was speaking here. Well, I'm here. I just put it like that. And I'm always grateful to be asked, and I've spoken here before, and so is my husband, and I have a lot of friends in this area, a lot of old friends and some new friends, and a lot of the girls from the Bethany house over the years have come to a retreat that I go to, and I've just kind of networked with people in this area, and I will tell you that if you stay in recovery, and I hope you do, and you go to places, which I hope you do, it's really been good for me, you will meet people that you will see over and over and over again. And it's the best feeling in the world to walk into a place and not only to recognize people, but to be recognized and to be met with the kind of greeting that comes only from us. So no matter what's going on, that's a good thing, always a good thing. And I have been a lot of different places. I've been a lot of places other than where I live, and most of the time where I go, and my husband and I make it a point to always go to meetings as many as possible when we travel, and it feels that way. And our home group is especially careful to welcome people that way, because we know that's important. I do have a home group. My home group is the Steps to Recovery group in Coates, North Carolina. That's the address. It's right outside of Coates. And we have really good attendance to be where we are. We're about 3 miles out of a little town, about 6 miles out of a little bigger town, and we're pretty close to where 40 and 95 intersect. So Tom's been there before. A lot of y'all have been there before. And last night we had one of our quarterly speaker workshops, and we had Jim Kay from Pathtown, or wherever he's from, Winston-Salem, come and talk about home group, and what a great job he has. We've had Tom and Tom's come, and we've had a couple people come. Steve M has come, and it's amazing to me, even having been around a little while, what I can learn from those, and what kind of questions people ask who really can put a light on things, even if they haven't been around very long. A home group has been key in my recovery. A good home group sticks to the primary purpose of what we do, and there's really no other purpose. There's no other purpose that will keep me alive. And we're very diligent. Some people say too diligent about that in our group, but it's too easy to get astray from that. And you never know who's going to walk in the door, and if they were someone, as I was, you better be on the topic of primary purpose, or it will just take excuse excuse me, that little bit to send me out the door. It would have for me if you'd have been talking about anything else. I'm sorry. And even then I didn't really want to stay here, but I kept going back and thinking about what I'd heard as I went to open speaker meetings and open meetings, even before I joined Alcoholics Anonymous. It took me a while to get here once I started going for somebody else. And when I finally realized I needed to go for a different reason, I'd heard enough to know where I belonged. I'd heard enough about what my problem was to go where I belonged. And I'm so grateful for that, and that's what we try to do. And that's what Jim talked to last night. He talked about a lot of valuable things for home group to do, but he mainly talked about how important it is that we are there for people, whether they're brand new or whether they've been around for a long time, because we all share the same thing. It's the only thing we all share. We share our isms, but we share our alcoholism, we share our drinking problem. And that's how we talk. We talk about that. And I hope I can do that tonight. My story, my talk is just who I am, and I've always been about relationships. I'm not going to get into relationships tonight, but my life has always revolved, and my response to life has always been kind of affected by the people in my life and my reaction to those people. And either my accepting those people or blaming those people or being a victim of those people or whatever. I've heard people give talks where they never really even mention anybody else, and that's fine with me. But I can't do that. And I'm so grateful to understand that that's who I am. I walked in the door as a non-member the last time, January 1st, 1989. And before I left that night, I picked up a white chip at Melba's in Cary, North Carolina. I'd fought it and fought it and fought it. And I think the crazy part of that was that was the only answer for me, that I thought it was going to be my death. I thought it was going to be the end of my life, the end of a way for me to have any release from all the craziness in my life that alcohol had really created. I looked at it as alcohol is my solution, and really I had all my problems were because I drank. And I just couldn't see that. I think that's a real true characteristic of this disease. We talk about denial, but there are a lot of denials. There were a lot in my life, and one of them was the absolute terror that I felt about not drinking, because I had enough integrity still to understand that if I picked up a white chip, because I'd been to enough meetings to know that was serious business. And to me it was very serious, and I thought, well, now if you do this, you can't drink anymore. Really didn't think you could drink anymore. And I haven't had anything to drink since January the 1st of 1989. I'm so grateful for that. I thought I'd have to give up, I don't know what. And I didn't want to give it up. I didn't want to give up that option. But I had no other options but to do that at the very end. And things were not all that terrible. I'll get into that a little bit. But for me, they were. The way I felt was just my total insanity, that even it took me a long time even after that to recognize how just crazy I was and how I looked at everything just skewed. Just like I had the wrong pair of glasses on or something, and they were crooked. I'll back up a little bit. I was born into an Air Force family. My father was a veteran Air Force person. And he was in the military for over 30 years. He was in the Air Force. He served in 3 wars, 2, Korea, Vietnam twice in the 60s, and he finally retired in the late 60s, sometime around the early 70s. By then my parents had separated. I was grown, married, working. And he moved to Tacoma, Washington. There's a big Air Force facility up there, and finished drinking himself to death. While he was living and working, he functioned. His whole life, I see now, revolved around alcohol and what went with that. He was always a member of some organization where he could go and drink. He was always the president of the club on the base and that kind of thing, and loved to play all the little poker games and the whatever it is, cribbage, I don't know, all that stuff. But those places had usually at the time, was in the late 50s, early 60s, those places had slot machines. So what he would do, if we got to have a family night out, that meant that Mother would get all dressed up and look beautiful, paint her nails and lips and wear something with high heels, which is what I thought was just, God, I really wanted to be like that when I grow up. And we'd go, and my sister and I would drink Shirley Temples and go play the slot machines. They'd give us a roll or two of nickels, and I really liked that. And it was time for me to be with my family. It was the only way we could really be with my father as a family, and we would order something to eat, and before the night was over, it would not be very good. We'd have to leave, and I guess it was the best it could be. But he was absent in every way. He was absent emotionally, and he was absent as often as he could be because of his duty. As he would say, he would be TDY, which is travel duty. And then later on, he was absent from us, I think just because he couldn't be there. So the only real memories I have of my father, and I'm telling you this for a reason, it has to do with the 8th and the 9th step, where when he would beat the teetotal living devil out of me with a belt or a belt buckle or something, when he'd be drunk enough and angry enough, and I would have done something he considered bad enough. So I did not have a good relationship with my father, and found out later on I blamed everything in my life for that, and expected my husbands and everyone else to make up for that, to be what he had not been, according to this fantasy that I was unfortunate enough to watch growing up on TV. You know, Leave It to Beaver. Oh, I thought everybody should be Ward and June Cleaver, and then there was the Donna Reed show and all that stuff, and we were the Alfred Hitchcock Hour or something. I don't know what we were, but we were not that, and I thought that's how everyone else was. And so I began very early being very dissatisfied. And when we were in Germany in the late 50s, early 60s, we were stationed over there, and things really got bad, and my mother had I guess sort of a nervous breakdown because she was trapped over there. We could, there was no phone back then over there. You didn't have a phone where you lived. You couldn't really do anything or go anywhere. And flight over there took 18 hours. Some of y'all probably remember that. We took these little prop jets or something. And my poor mother, I was airsick all the way over there for 18 hours. But anyway, it was terrible. And all I know, because we didn't talk about it, was that there was a feeling of just darkness in our home. It was clean, and my mother cooked, and she didn't have a problem with anything other than the fact that she was obsessed with my father and what she could do to control his drinking and his womanizing. And that had an effect on me because she was sad all the time. And so I developed the role of trying to keep everything, I guess, just okay, because I would feel so threatened when it would all break loose in the middle of the night. It would just be horrible. So I say all that to say I had no training in family relationships or how to be a partner or a spouse or even a sister, because that did not enable me to learn how to be a loving, kind sister. I was always jealous of my sister because my father seemed to favor her. That's enough about him until later, but I will just say that I came into my puberty, my early teens, very innocent, very confused, and very much in my own world. I did not live in this world. I didn't realize it. I was always somewhere else in my mind. Wanted to be somewhere else. I was a real avid reader. I would read things way beyond my years. Was fascinated by anything and everybody, but it had to do with me. I wasn't real interested in what you were interested in. But I got along well with people. I was enough of a chameleon. We'd moved enough that I could just sort of take on whatever role. And I was a good daughter to my mother, but I began to hate my father and anybody, I guess, that I felt was cruel or unkind in any way. I just thought that was so wrong. And I reacted violently to that. I can still do it today if I'm not careful, especially when it comes to children and animals. But that's a different story. I've learned that that's just the way the world is. And we lived over there, and we came back in the early 60s to Montgomery, Alabama. There was a military base there. My father had been stationed there. My sister and my mother and I came back. My father went to Puerto Marina, California. He was stationed there, and there was never a word said about the fact they were separating. It was only that was his duty, to be his duty station. We moved into a nice little house and close to the grammar school. My mother went back to work, and we went to grammar school, or junior high school, whatever it was, 7th, 8th grade, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And that was a very different world for me because I had grown up in the military where everyone in class was new. They were either coming or going. And it was easy for me to fit in. I got along well with other kids and did okay in school. And that was an environment where everyone in there had teased and gone to the same nursery school together. And it was very cliquey, and I was baffled by that. I didn't have the same accent they did. I didn't have the same political views, even then in the early 60s. And I became a little bit of a right-wing liberal or something compared to what the rest of them were in Montgomery, and was ostracized for a little bit, and that was confusing for me at 12 and 13 years old. But it worked out. I began to make friends and began to do well and kind of assimilated myself into that environment. And in the meantime, our lives got more and more unhappy. We were more and more stressed because of my father's activities and lack of support, and so I was learning to live two lives. I was also very, very fearful and didn't even know it. I was very angry and didn't know it. All the isms, selfish, self-centered, and nothing but a daydreamer. I don't know how I got through school and did well, because I was always thinking about something else. I wanted your dress or your house or your boyfriend or whatever. And I equated well-being with well-to-do. And I learned later that was because I've been both. I have well-being now, and I'm not all that well-to-do, but I was well-to-do for a while, and it does not equate. But I didn't know that because those girls seemed happier than I did. So I thought that was the problem. So I began to blame my mother and my father and everyone else for the way I felt. And I continued to blame people for the way I felt and expecting for circumstances and people to change the way I felt until well into sobriety. And that is an unsuccessful way to live. And it is a very good way to drink. Very good way to drink. Because you couldn't drink the way I drank, and I'd have a lot of good reasons. I had a storehouse, warehouse of reasons. I could just go in there and get a reason every day to drink the way I did. And whether they were real reasons or not, in my mind they were. Nobody could, I couldn't have said, oh, I'm just going to get drunk and really mess up and do some terrible things because I want to. There had to be a reason. So that baffles me now, but it's certainly the way that it was. I was of the generation going to junior high school and high school in the 60s before drugs arrived. And I'm grateful to say I don't even have to mention drugs other than I'm so glad I didn't have an exposure to them, because the way I am now, I can't stop chewing a pack of gum till it's gone. So there's no telling what I would have done. And I know what I did when I started drinking, and I'm grateful for that. I know I wouldn't be here tonight. So I wasn't exposed to that, but what I was exposed to was the culture of young college kids and other older high school kids who did nothing but drink, had a lot of money, joined fraternities and sororities and drank. And as soon as I was able to come in from a date with a regular guy whose mother would pick us up, take us to the movie, drop us back off at my house, he would peck me good night, and I'd crawl through the back window when my mother was asleep, and I'd go out and party with them. And I just loved it. I finally felt happy, briefly. I remember going one night to something called the Little Foxes at the top of the Holiday Inn in Montgomery, Alabama, with a guy who was a good bit older. It was a platonic thing, but he liked to take me out because I was cute and I could dress up like I was whatever, you had to be 18. Back then we had paper driver's license, if you remember that. And I could change the 43 to a 48 to a 43, erase that, and they'd let me in. And I remember one night I was drinking some kind of straight stuff. Finally, I didn't like all those little fancy drinks. Just start drinking straight stuff. And I felt so good and so happy. I would run to the ladies' room very often and just look in the mirror to see, is that really me? I couldn't believe that was me. And it was, I like to talk about the roulette wheel going around in the little the little ball, just kind of finally going click. And that was my click, that alcohol. Everything was okay. And sometimes it was great, and sometimes it felt really good. And I began to drink excessively in the beginning. I didn't drink every day. Sometimes I might not drink but once a month in high school and when I went off to college. But when I drank, it was on. I had plans to have a career, get my degree, have a career, be the woman. I'd seen my mother just suffer under all she had to do, because she had hooked her life to a guy that didn't really care much. And I was going to be the one who was in charge of my life. I wanted an education, I wanted a good job, I wanted to make lots of money, I wanted to be in charge. I might have a toy boy or something along the way, but that was going to be about it for me, for marriage and relationships. And yet, when I was a year in school, had a scholarship, but when I was a year in school, I met my first husband-to-be. He was older, he was at school at Auburn, and he drank more than I did. He would come down for the weekends, we'd get together, and it was just a party. How my mother didn't know or stop that, I don't know. And it was 1966, and he called me. He'd been joined the Air Force because they were drafting anybody who moved, and he didn't want to go to Vietnam. And he said, when I get out of basic, let's get married. So we got married after I had a year of school. And I went back to school finally in the mid-'70s in Minnesota and finished my degree. But I was so willing just to throw that all away because it got hard and just compromise all that. And I wasn't really drinking too much then because he drank. And when we got married, I wanted everything to change. I wanted to create whatever life I thought I needed and never had. And we couldn't do that if he was stopping off and getting beer or booze every day. So I became an #1 royal pain in the butt. The nag from you know where, dissatisfied, angry, hurt all the time. My feelings were never satisfied. There was nothing he did that could please me, and it was all his fault. Poor guy. Really. I know he loved me, and I know at some point I loved him, but it just wasn't. It was doomed, and we were together 16 years like that. I expected something that no one could give me. And the more he drank, the angrier I got until about somewhere along in I know when it was the mid-'70s. I just graduated from the University of Minnesota. He was downtown in Minneapolis with his buddies. I was working, such a martyr. And he came by and said, do you want to go for a drink? We're going out for a drink. And I usually would say, we can't afford it. No, how could you do that? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah. So we went across the street to a place called Ichabod's downtown from the Idea Center, and I had my first, and not to be my last until 1989, drink of the day. And I drank daily, every day I could. From that point, something just clicked in me. I couldn't get enough, it's all I could think about, and yet I functioned, I worked, I was married, I was true to my husband, I did all that. And so I was schizophrenic, but that is not a good way to have a relationship with anyone. Because when booze is primary, there's no room for God or the other person or anything. It has to be second. And I've learned in this marriage after sobriety that there's a whole lot different way that really does work. And what happened with him is he was just delighted for a while because he would come home and I would come home. He was in grad school then. And I'd be his little party girl again. We'd sit around the table, make goo-goo eyes, talk about our day, and la-di-da. And the next thing you know, we were ripping doors off and screaming and yelling and throwing things every single day. I was just practicing for my next marriage is what I was doing. But anyway, I kept thinking when he gets through with school, gets a job, we'll have enough money, I can have a house and a dog and blah, blah, blah. So he finally did, and we moved to Raleigh, 1979. He got a really good job. I got a really good job. We had a new house, and new truck, new car, puppy, everything, and I don't know if he hated my guts, but I was just really unhappy. Nothing would satisfy me. I was miserable. And I started looking around for excitement. Didn't know that's what I was doing. I went to work at a place called, I went to work and I met my future sister-in-law who was married to a worse alcoholic than anybody. My father had never known one like that before. He's sober today. Well, all my unresolved isms, my selfishness, my secretiveness, my lying, my resentments, all of that found an avenue to justify what I started to do at that point. We had good jobs. We worked for the same company, my friend and I, and we would travel together. We'd go to Chicago to market and all that, and we were wild. We were really, really wild. It was the early 80s, and there was disco going on, and it was just so much fun. And I'm thinking, I didn't get to do this when I was a teenager. I got married to blah, blah, too young. And it's a wonder I survived. I would be on Rush Street. If y'all know anything about Chicago, It's like the party street, like Bourbon Street at Mardi Gras in New Orleans. And I'd come out of the BBC Club or some nightclub, and there might be a limo there. Somebody would have the door, might just get in with them. And the next morning, I mean, really, if they looked good and they were having fun. Next morning, I'd have to look at a matchbook or find out where I was so my friend could get a cab. She didn't drink like I did. She partied, and come get me. It was crazy. And I survived. And we'd come home on the plane. I'd still be half drunk. And a lot of times, the next morning, the people we'd been out with the night before, we'd all be in the lobby together waiting for our cabs. And one day she sent somebody to find me, and he couldn't find me. And she said, "There she is." And he said, "What happened to her?" I was not the same gal as the night before. But there's so many images that come. You know, I'm sure that you're the same way. It's things just that aren't so bad come to your mind, and yet I just cringe. I just get a really bad feeling still about them. I feel shame and all those things. And one of them is we were at where we were staying, a really nice hotel. I got on the elevator about 6:30, 7 o'clock one morning after the night before, and I looked pretty good the night before. I was all cleaned up and happy, and the elevator was full of people getting ready for their business day, all dressed up, smelling good, briefcases and everything. And I got on that elevator, and everybody in there kind of stepped back. And that's a very little thing. That is not the woman that I wanted to be. And then one morning, at some point on another trip, the housekeeping opened the door to our room, and I was still in there with the covers over my head, and we'd had a party in there the night before, and all she said was, "Lordy, Lordy, Lordy," and slammed the door and left. That's not good. When you're 30-something years old, that's not good. So it wasn't too long after that I met my husband, Steve, the one I'm married to now. A lot of y'all know Steve. I met him one Tuesday night. We talk about this sometimes. And I was ready. I was ready to do something. I'd gotten crazier and crazier, and the next step wasn't that big a deal. Because 2 weeks later, I ran off with him. I left my home, my furniture, my dog, my husband, my rings on, just real drama queen, rings on the counter, and broke a lot of hearts. People in my former husband's family that I loved dearly and loved me. The closest thing to a father I ever had, my father-in-law. I eventually made amends to them, but it was just amends. It didn't change anything. And I ran off with Steve. And eventually we got married, and things got really, really bad. He had another problem as well as alcohol. I'd never dealt with that before, and things got bad, dangerous, chaotic, crazy. So we kept trying to fix that. We bought some land, put a little trailer, built all that stuff, and it just got worse. It just got terrible. And finally his sister, who decided after we got together she wanted nothing else to do with us. It did not go the way she had planned. She thought we were just going to have a good time for a while. Came down with a big book, and I went to my first meeting, and that was in '88. Later on that year, right towards Labor Day, I left my husband. I came in one night. I'd been going to Al-Anon because that was what I needed to do. I could still drink. He was the one with the problem, and I walked in that back door. Al-Anon saved my life. One of the meetings I went to at the time, they talked about, for some reason, I don't know why, because it's in our big book, but they talked about the promises, and when they read those promises, my heart broke. It was the life, it was the thing, they were the things that I had always just not even imagined were so wonderful. All of those wonderful promises. And I will say that for the most part they're true in my life now, but at the time it just almost killed me. It just almost was a physical slap in the face because it was a direct, vivid comparison to the way my life was. I was full of fear, anger, I was terrified, I didn't know what I was going to do. I'd left my life for this guy, and on and on. And so anyway, I came home one night from the Al-Anon meeting, and he turned around, he was on the phone. We weren't supposed to be drinking, he'd been drinking, and I took one look at his face, at his eyes, and if you've ever been there as a woman, you know you got to get the heck out of there. And I got the heck out of there. And I didn't go home until after Christmas when he got sober. He went to treatment and got sober. And so I rocked and rolled along and didn't get sober. I would sneak around and drink while I moved to Fayetteville for a while and rented a house with my birthday as the address before I even went in and looked at it. That's how crazy I was. I needed a place to live. Then the last night I drank, we had moved me from Fayetteville. It was New Year's Eve, excuse me. And we were trying to decide where we were going to go. I've been to a lot of meetings in Cary with my sister and brother-in-law, and like the people there, felt comfortable. He'd gotten sober in Smithfield, and he wanted to go there with his friends. And we got in a fight, which we fought about everything. We didn't know how to have a conversation even. We fought. And so I did what I always do. I got in my car, and I went and got a bottle and got a room. Well, I came home the next day, and he, of course, was scared. He'd only been sober about 3 weeks. My sister-in-law was there. I went with her to Cary and stayed for a few days and picked up a white chip, and I did not want to quit drinking, y'all. I did not. But I knew that I had to give it a try. And so what I did was the way I do pretty much everything, and that's 110%. I went to 90 and 90. I got a sponsor. Well, I went through about 10 women. If they didn't act just right when I called them, I'd get another one. And if they were busy in the lease, it's like, you're supposed to be there for me. You told me to call you. So, but eventually I did get one, and I used it, and I worked used her, and I worked the steps, and I got a home group. I went to a meeting every day. And when someone says I'm too busy to go to a meeting or I need me time, I think that's crazy. I worked an hour and a half away. I was on the road all day. Came home, I cooked supper. I married an old-fashioned guy, and cooked supper, went to a meeting, came home, blah, blah, got up and went to work the next day. And it worked. And when I didn't think I could make a meeting at night, because we started going to counseling one night a week, I went at lunch. And I networked with a lot of people on German Street in Fayetteville because of that. Anything I've ever done to take care of my recovery has always paid me more than any effort that I've exerted. Going to that lunch meeting that first day, networked with people I know still today. John B., a lot of y'all know him and some other people there. So I found that to be true over and over and over again. But I got sober in spite of myself, and I'm still sober today, and I still do a lot of the same things I did then. I worked the steps. The third step I did, I believe, I'm going to talk about the second step. Y'all know how insane I was, and that has been a slow process. But the third step was, I realized later on, was when I just quit doing anything but what the program said. If you said it, and I read it in the literature, I didn't question it. And I was always the what about, but what if, but what about, I didn't do that. I just took it at face value, and I just let it be what it was. And that, to me, was absolutely turning my life and my will over to the care of this program anyway. I finally finished my fourth step after about a year. I gave my fifth step. I was scared to leave anything out. And I said some things at the very beginning that I thought, you know how we do. And the lady said, don't worry about it. I'll forget it when you walk out of here anyway. And I said, really? She said, yeah, I've already forgotten what you've already told me. She said, I've heard so many. And I found that to be true when I do it. Some of the girls I sponsor get really mad at me because they'll say, I told you that in my fifth step. I'm like, I'm sorry, I just don't remember. What I know is that I love you. Whatever. And the sixth step took me forever. I would write and talk to my sponsor, and she made me write down how it made my life, your life unmanageable, and damage I'd done. So I found out what my defects were, and then I began to pray one by one, first with procrastination, and ask God to help me cooperate with Him. Never on my own have I taken care of anything, especially defects. And still today, I know I have no excuses. If something is really a problem, God will take care of it if I really cooperate with Him. So I can't say I'm working on something. Either I'm giving it to God or I'm not, and I have to do that every day. And I'm still doing it. The major things that were some lying and sneakiness and some other things, He's pretty well, and most of my procrastination, He's pretty well done as much as I would let Him do, and we're still going down that road. The eighth step was hard for me. I, of course, had my father on the list because I learned that when I worked the eighth step, the biggest part of that was forgiveness. Forget writing everybody down. The process of learning to forgive is the key. And that has been the most valuable thing just about, except I'm powerless over alcohol, that I've learned in recovery. Because every day there's a reason to forgive. Every day there's a reason to find a resentment or forgive, even little things. And everything, even little things are big to me, I'll tell you. If it's, you can say something or look at me funny, or I can still get. So major forgiveness, minor forgiveness. So the beautiful thing about that step is that I learned that it's possible to forgive. I might not forget, and by that I simply mean what I've learned from the pain and just a lot of the things that came from taking a look at the people on my 8-step list and the damage I'd done to me and to them, but mainly to them. This business of damage to me, well, that's fine, but really I've hurt you, or I've done something to you, or I owe you emotionally or physically or anything. I owe the library for 20 years in Garner. Went back, and the little girl who took my money was younger than the books had even been checked out. It was crazy, but I had to do it. It'll eat at you. If you really do that 8-step, or it did me, it would eat at me. And so I was able to make amends, and I did not know how I'd make them to my former husband. I had just walked off and left him in the wind. He called me one day, and he said, I recognized his voice. He told me who he was, and I started crying, and I couldn't stop. He said, "What's wrong?" And I'm thinking, this guy's asking me what's wrong. And we talked, and he said, "Well, look, I got you started." I said, "No, you didn't." He's talking about the drinking. And he was having the same problems he had in our marriage with his current marriage, and we talked for a long, long time. I cried for 2 days, the pure relief. He said, "Hey, I'm okay." But he didn't have to say that, and he wouldn't have if he didn't mean it. It didn't matter. I was able to tell him how much, and I know he knew how much I regretted it. Same thing with his parents. I talked to them, and a lot of other people, a lot of other situations. But the big one I want to share with you that I kind of led up to earlier was the absolute rage and hate and blame I had with my father. And I know a lot of little girls have daddy issues, but this was more than that. I didn't realize it till my sponsor helped me look at it. This affected every single relationship I had with everybody. Men, women, my mother, my sister, everything was affected by this just pure, almost rage that I still had with me. So I had to forgive him. And he did do me a lot of damage, physically and emotionally and a lot of other ways. And I thought, I don't know how I can do that. And my sponsor said, just pray. And now that you know why he did it, it should be a little easier for you anyway. Didn't take it away. But I understood he really didn't have a choice. And when I went to see him the week he died, he was in intensive care up at the Seattle-Tacoma Hospital, military hospital. He was the color of this wood, his eyes, his skin, everything. And he was saying, "Hey, I really missed you. When I get out of here, we're going to have to go to the club and have a drink." And that's before I really started drinking. And I thought, later on, when I was working on my 8-step, I thought, that was the way he thought. But it was a miracle. It was almost like a magic move in a card game or something. I'll get into that, but I used to play bridge, and there was something called the finesse, and the first time it worked, I thought, oh, this is magic. But it was like that because I felt the relief of the forgiveness. And so when I'd been sober a year or two, my husband and I went to Nashville, which is where he's buried. I didn't go to his funeral. My sister and mother did. I didn't go to his funeral. In a military cemetery. And if you're familiar with that, they're just plaques, markers in the ground. There are no real landmarks there. And I have no sense of direction. And I went to the kiosk, and they said blah, blah, and I said, okay, because I wanted to make amends to him. And I got out of our truck, Steve waited in the truck with my little flowers, and I walked straight to his grave, got on my knees, put down the flowers, and asked for his forgiveness. And I will tell you, there was a physical release, almost like when you see in a movie where the smoke comes out of somebody. That was the way I felt. And I felt his forgiveness, and I felt my forgiveness. And since then, I've been okay with it, as far as I know. I've done a little more work on some things just because I needed to do some work on some family things like we all do, but it was a miracle. No million years of therapy or inventories or anything could have done that for me. And I've learned how powerful forgiveness is. And a lot of y'all knew Wade J, and that was one of his big things. He talked about how debilitating unforgiveness is and how freeing and cleansing and healing forgiveness is. So I try to remember that every day because I'm kind of prickly still about things. So it's easy for me to be full of unforgiveness. I'm really doing well with my 10th step and have for some time. Every morning I'll write for a while. I don't go outside to work anymore. I work at home, but I'm sort of kind of call it retired, although I'm really not. I'm so busy all the time. And I write every morning. I make it a point, and my husband calls it discipline, but I call it sanity. And so I'm able to do an inventory, especially if something's really on my mind or bothering me. And I do a little bit at night, and one of the things that I want to share always is that getting sober is hard. I hated it. I'd come home early from work every day. I had a job on the road, so nobody really knew. I'd get into bed and pull the covers over my head and cry. I just hated it. I had a feeling of impending doom all the time. Nothing went my way all the time. All I could think about is if I could just take one drink, which I didn't do because I was where I was supposed to be, not where my feet were, not where my head was. And I was full of pain. My husband and I had no relationship. We fought all the time. We yelled. He cussed. Money was IRS had frozen our bank accounts. I had a really bad deal. I mean, y'all know the deal. I don't have to go into the details. Everybody's got their own side of that. But I didn't drink, and I went to meetings, and I worked the steps, and my sponsor finally said, you need to quit being the martyr and the victim and just get busy and help somebody. Well, bingo, guess what? I did. And I thought, help somebody? I'm the one that needs to help. You're supposed to help me. I thought, I'm going to get another sponsor. You ever felt that way? She's not. She doesn't hear me. She doesn't hear. And then she got a new sponsee, and boy, that was not good. But, I had someone I could talk to and trust. I knew who loved me. And so she taught me what to do with the next person and the next person, whether I wanted to or not. And I had to get over my resentment about my time and energy and all that stuff because that doesn't count. Because I don't want to get drunk. And now I'm over it pretty much. I'm really glad that I am. What a way to live, because I knew I couldn't stay sober that way. So I do the 10th step pretty much every day. It's really hard once you've been around not to do it, or at least because it's just icky when you got something going on. It's just icky, and I don't like icky. I'm like a 2 back a day person, so icky is not me. And then the 11th step, I from the very beginning, I was told to get on my knees and ask God to take me through the day and keep me sober, and I did that. I don't know why, because by then I didn't pray anymore, but I did. I have never missed, I don't think, doing that, wherever. I even get in the stall on the floor, like before I speak, because that's what I was taught to do. And then at night I do the same thing, and I do some other stuff before I go to bed. And I will tell you that in the beginning, after I'd done it a while, if I got in bed without getting on my knees and asking God and thanking God, I'd get back up. I couldn't go to sleep. I thought, what is wrong? So I'd have to do that. I don't know how important that is to anybody else, and I really don't know how important it is at all. But I know it's what I do, and I know I'm sober. I know all of these things, as I said earlier about the 3rd step. They just work, and I can't figure them out. I don't want to figure them out. It wouldn't be powerful enough if I could figure it out. Sobriety has brought me a happy marriage. It has taken away my fear of financial insecurity, and that's about all I'm going to say about that. We have a good life. We have a loving marriage. We pray together. We have lots of friends. We go every year to the convention. If you don't go, please think about it. All the things in my life outside of my home group I've done. I've been nurtured by my home group, have made my sobriety interesting, full, wide, full of friends, and I think about not going to retreats, conferences, conventions. It would be just a boring black hole. I wouldn't be drinking, but that would be about it. And sometimes it's not easy to come up with the money to do some of these things, even though they're not that expensive. They have been invaluable, absolutely invaluable. They come first. Getting outside and going to AA activities has been first with me. And I'm so glad I was led that way. I think we're like little ducks. We follow whatever we're shown. And it breaks my heart to see a girl come in who's really not sponsored. It's kind of, how do you feel today? Go to a meeting, not a group, that kind of thing, because they never seem to learn. And they don't make it. And they wonder why. So I had a good, strong sponsor. I try to be one. We have a good, strong group. We do what we're asked, and we provide an opportunity, I hope, for anyone who wants to get sober, whether they stay with us or not. And that's what it's all about, and the rest of it is just gravy. And if you're new and that sounds real la-di-da, well, it really is kind of la-di-da. It's a whole lot better than I would find at 4 in the morning in some bar closing with a light on coming in and just wondering what the heck I was going to do where I was. That's pretty bad. That hadn't happened in a long time. And plus, I'd be too old for that now anyway. I wouldn't want to deal with that. But I will tell you that I'm a happy woman. I've changed from sales, kind of retired from that, and I've been painting for about 12 or 15 years. It started with murals, and now I'm a fine artist, and I love my life. I just took a week workshop in Myrtle Beach, saved for a long time, and I was about as happy as I've ever been down there. It's almost like AA with the positive energy. So it's amazing when we ask God to help us do, and we put ourselves aside and our recovery first, what's possible. I've always say, am I sure I can stay sober if I do this, or am I not? And if I'm not, I just don't do it. Whether it's a trip to Hawaii I want or anything else, I just don't do it. I might gripe about it, but that's okay. I'm still sober when it's all over with. So I did find y'all tonight, and I will get home tonight. And I want to thank you so much for having me. And it's good to see some of my old friends and meet some new ones. And I have no idea what I said. I'm really ADD, so whatever it was, I hope it helped you. And I feel pretty good, so thanks a lot.